I knew something had shifted the night. I saw him sitting alone on his porch, nursing a half-empty bottle of rye, like it had answers he wasn't ready to say out loud. It was late September, the kind of evening that wraps everything in a quiet chill, and the air carried that mix of dying leaves and wood smoke. I just finished stacking firewood behind my cabin when I noticed him. Ryan, lit by the soft flicker of the porch light, his elbows on his knees, wedding ring catching the glow in a way that made my stomach turn unexpectedly. Not with jealousy, exactly. More like something older. Something I'd been pretending I'd outgrown. He lived 2 cabins down, same lakeside strip, close enough to smell the cedar from my pile when the wind blew right. We'd been neighbors for 3 years. Friends, maybe casual ones. He'd wave while jogging. I'd wave while pruning my roses like an 80-year-old man. Sometimes we'd help each other carry groceries or exchange borrowed tools with a chuckle about how neither of us would ever return them. But every so often we'd end up sharing beers on my porch or his, the kind of quiet conversations that don't look like much, but always leave me lying awake at night, wondering why his voice lingered so long in my head. Ryan was magnetic, calm, the kind of guy who made eye contact when you talked and made you feel like you were saying something worth hearing. Married, yes, to a woman I'd only seen around in fleeting moments, usually with her car packed like she was always arriving or always leaving. Lately, mostly leaving. Tonight, there was a silence around him that I hadn't seen before. A stillness that made me hover at the edge of my front step for a moment longer than I should have, heart tapping out a rhythm I didn't quite like. I told myself I was just being neighborly when I walked over. "Late one for you?" I said, voice low but teasing, trying to cut through whatever that look in his eyes was. He looked up and smiled, not the wide grin he gave the mailwoman or the casual smirk he gave me when we traded jokes, but something small, uncertain, real. "Couldn't sleep," he murmured. "Thought the stars might help." I almost told him that sometimes they make it worse. Instead, I sat beside him without asking, close enough to feel the heat from his shoulder, not close enough to touch. Neither of us said anything for a long time, and in that quiet, I knew something was coming. Something neither of us was ready for. But that had been waiting for a long, long time. Ryan and I first talked properly the winter after he moved in, when I found him half cursing, half laughing at a snowblower that refused to start. I was shoveling my driveway by hand, stubborn pride and all that, and offered to take over while he wrestled with the machine. He declined, then offered me a beer for the trouble. That beer turned into 3, and somehow we ended up talking about music, bad high school haircuts, and how neither of us really knew what we were doing with our lives. That was the thing with Ryan. He made it easy to forget how alone you were. Over time, our run-ins turned into routines, weekend porch drinks, occasional hikes through the pine trails behind our street, long pauses in conversation that weren't uncomfortable, just unspoken understandings. He was a good listener and funny in a quiet, dry way that snuck up on you. Like when I teased him about his plaid shirt collection, they do make shirts in other patterns, I said once, and he looked me dead in the eye and said, but then how would I assert dominance at the lumberyard? It was the kind of friendship that never needed labels. But sometimes it felt like more. Or maybe I just wanted it to. Last summer, we ended up hiking the Old Fire Lookout Trail that overlooked Lake Keegan. It had been his idea, said he needed air, a break from the house, said it like it was casual, but there was something tight in his smile, something unsaid. We brought sandwiches, 2 water bottles, and a portable speaker that only worked half the time. I still remember the way the wind kicked up his hair at the summit, and how he stood on the edge with his arms slightly out, like he wanted the breeze to carry him somewhere else. "Ever think about just driving until you're gone?" he asked that day, watching the lake ripple beneath the cliffs. "Sometimes," I said, "but I like coming home too much." He turned to me, something unreadable in his face. "Yeah," he said quiet. "Home's complicated." That word hung between us. Still does. Now, sitting beside him again under the porch light, the silence wasn't empty. It was full of things unsaid, familiar, in a way that should have made it easier, but didn't. He offered me a drink from the bottle. I took it, letting the burn of the whiskey distract me from how close his knee was to mine. Too close for someone who was supposed to be just a neighbor. Too far for someone who wasn't. You coming to the lake clean up tomorrow? I asked just to fill the air. Ryan nodded. Figured you'd guilt me into it, if I didn't. I smirked. I'm very persuasive. That's one word for it. It was the kind of harmless jab we always traded, but his smile lingered this time, like he was waiting for me to say something else. I couldn't. The lake cleanup was a small event our neighborhood association ran every fall, trash bags, waiters, and a few canoes for the shoreline collection. We'd both signed up, partly because we liked pretending we were more outdoorsy than we were, and partly because it gave us a reason to spend a Saturday together. But the forecast called for rain, and with his truck in the shop, he was hitching a ride with me in the morning, meaning we'd be wet, cold, and stuck in my cabin afterward with nowhere to go until the storm passed. I told myself it was just weather, but later as I lay in bed, I kept thinking about how his fingers brushed mine when he handed me the bottle, about the way he looked at me when he thought I wasn't looking, and how, even with the rain coming, part of me wanted to be stranded with him, just to see what might happen if we finally stopped pretending. The rain came earlier than expected. By 10 a.m., the skies above Lake Keegan turned a washed-out gray, and the wind began pushing ripples over the water. We were halfway through hauling trash bags to the shoreline dumpster when the first drops hit, soft, uncertain, like the storm was still making up its mind. Ryan looked up at the sky, then over at me, his soaked hoodie clinging to his arms. "You said noon," he said, squinting as rain tapped across his forehead. Mother Nature clearly didn't get my memo, I muttered, tying off the last bag. By the time we got everything loaded into the back of my car, we were drenched. My boots squelched with every step. Ryan's hair was plastered to his forehead, and he was shivering, hands buried deep in the kangaroo pocket of his hoodie. "Your place is closer," he said, voice rough from the cold. "You mind if I—" "Yeah, of course." I nodded too quickly. "Yeah, come on." The drive back was quiet, save for the soft patter of rain on the windshield. He kept glancing out the window, lips parted like he wanted to say something but thought better of it. I kept my eyes on the road, knuckles white on the steering wheel, hyper-aware of the way his leg occasionally brushed mine when we hit a bump. Inside the cabin, warmth wrapped around us like a blanket. I turned the heat up and tossed him a towel from the hallway closet. "Shower's yours if you want," I said, voice too casual. "Unless you prefer pneumonia." He cracked a tired smile. "Tempting, but I'll take the shower." He disappeared down the hallway, and I stood there, heartbeat thudding like I'd just sprinted through the woods. I changed into dry clothes, then threw his soaked hoodie and jeans into the dryer before settling on the couch with a mug of tea I didn't really want. When he reappeared, he was in one of my old shirts, black, too big, the hem hitting low on his hips. His hair was still damp, curling slightly at the ends. He smelled faintly of my soap. I looked away. Too fast. "I owe you," he said, flopping down beside me. The couch dipped, our knees knocking together. "Next time it rains, I'll save you from hypothermia." "You'll have to get your truck back first," I said, trying to sound teasing, trying not to notice how close he was. He bumped his shoulder against mine, a quiet, familiar motion that somehow felt different now, more deliberate. We fell into an easy silence, the kind that used to comfort me. Now it just made everything louder inside my own head. I could feel the warmth of his thigh pressed to mine. I could feel the tug-of-war happening in my chest, because I wanted more. I'd wanted more for months, maybe longer. And I couldn't have it. "Hey," he said suddenly, "you remember that night last summer? On the ridge?" I swallowed. "Yeah." "You said something that stuck with me." He turned slightly, knee now fully pressed against mine, his gaze searching my face. "You said you like coming home too much." I smiled faintly. "Still true." "I've been thinking about that," he said. "What makes a place feel like home? Is it the space or the people in it?" I hesitated. The room felt too small. My breath too loud. "I guess it depends. I said, voice quiet. Some people just feel like home, no matter where you are. He didn't answer right away, just stared at me, and for a moment I thought I'd gone too far. But then, his hand brushed mine. Barely. I didn't move. His fingers lingered for half a second longer than they needed to. Then they were gone, like maybe he hadn't meant to do it. Or maybe he had. You cold? I asked, too aware of how close our bodies had become, how my pulse had started hammering in my ears. Little bit, he said, barely above a whisper. I reached for the blanket draped over the back of the couch and handed it to him, but he didn't take it. Only works if you share it, he said with a half smile. The kind he used when he was testing the waters. I hesitated, but I didn't say no. We shifted under the blanket, shoulders brushing, thighs aligned, the kind of closeness that felt like a question I didn't have the answer to yet. Outside, the rain turned heavier, drumming steadily against the windows. Inside, it was quiet, too quiet. He turned toward me, face inches from mine now, his expression unreadable. Can I ask you something? Yeah, I breathe. Do you ever stop pretending? I didn't know if he meant life or the marriage I never asked about, or us, this thing neither of us had ever named. I looked at him, really looked at him, and for the first time I saw it. That same fear, that same wanting, that same ache I'd been swallowing for months. I don't know, I said, honestly, but I think I'm tired of trying to. He didn't answer with words, but he didn't pull away, and that felt like the beginning of something we'd both been afraid to let in. The storm outside didn't let up. It roared harder against the windows, the wind whistling low through the eaves like the house itself was holding its breath. And maybe I was too. We sat there under the blanket, barely touching, and yet everything in me felt exposed. My chest tight, my palms warm, my thoughts a mess. Ryan hadn't moved since he asked if I ever stopped pretending. He was staring ahead, jaw tense like he was working something over. And I didn't know whether to let the moment pass or let it catch fire. You okay? I asked finally, voice quieter than I meant it to be. He nodded, but it was a slow, heavy thing. Yeah, I mean, he exhaled, running a hand through his still damp hair. No, not really. I turned toward him, giving him the space, the silence. My wife's gone, he said flatly, like he was stating the weather. Left 2 weeks ago. Took a suitcase and said she was tired of living with someone who wasn't fully in it. His voice cracked on the last word, barely, but I felt it, like something jagged lodged in my own throat. She's not wrong, he added. I wasn't. Not really. I blinked, unsure what to say. I'd known they were distant, but hearing that, twisted something deep in my stomach. I didn't tell you, he continued, because I didn't know what that meant for us. For this. I didn't want you to think I was, he paused, shaking his head, using you, or trying to make something out of nothing, or just desperate for connection. I stared at him, heart pounding. Ryan, I wouldn't have thought that. He looked over at me, really looked, and for once, there wasn't a flicker of humor in his eyes, no teasing smile. Just raw honesty, open and exposed. I don't know when it started, he said. Maybe that night on the ridge, maybe before. But I'd come over to borrow your shovel and find reasons to stay. I'd find excuses to sit on your porch just to hear you talk about stupid things like your tomato plants or how your dog used to snore like a freight train. I let out a shaky breath, surprised by the laugh that caught at the edge of it. I'd go home, he continued, and lay in bed next to someone who didn't ask how my day was. And I'd think about you, about what it would be like if you were the one there. Not because it was wrong between us, he added quickly, but because it felt like something could be right. My mouth opened, then closed, then opened again. I don't know what to say. You don't have to say anything, he murmured, voice low and rough. I just needed you to know, even if nothing changes, even if I'm too late. I stared down at our hands, close but not touching. My pulse was thundering in my ears. I thought I was imagining it, I said finally. All the times you'd look at me like there was more to say, but you didn't. The way you'd lean closer, but always stop just short. I thought I was reading too much into it. I told myself not to ruin what we had. His eyes searched mine. But, I wanted more, too, I said, and once the words were out, I couldn't take them back. I still do. It felt like a floodgate broke between us. Every unspoken thing that had sat tight-lipped in the corners of every shared moment poured out into the space we were both still afraid to cross. Ryan's breath hitched. I don't know what I'm doing, he admitted. I've spent so long being who I was supposed to be, I don't even know if I know how to be who I am. Then maybe we figure it out together, I said, not all at once. Not with answers. Just one truth at a time. He turned toward me. Slowly. Carefully. His knee brushed mine again, and this time, neither of us pulled back. I haven't touched anyone in months, he whispered. Not like this. Not because I wanted to. My chest felt like it would break open. Then can I? I raised my hand, fingers trembling just slightly, and touched his jaw. His skin was warm under my fingertips, rough from stubble, but impossibly soft in the places that mattered. Ryan leaned into the touch, like it meant something, like I meant something. He closed his eyes, then opened them again, gaze locked on mine. You have no idea how long I've wanted this. Yeah, I whispered. I think I do. The kiss was slow, earned. A breath held too long finally exhaled. His hand came up to cradle the side of my face, thumb grazing my cheekbone. I leaned in, deepening it, but carefully, so carefully, like we were still afraid the moment might shatter. And maybe we were, but when we finally pulled apart, his forehead rested against mine, and there was no fear there. Just warmth, relief, a quiet kind of joy. I didn't plan for this, he said softly. I didn't think I'd ever get to feel this way again. I traced a fingertip along the line of his collarbone. Neither did I, but I'm glad it's with you. He smiled, the smallest curve of lips, but it lit his whole face. We're really doing this, huh? I think we already are. Outside, the rain kept falling, but it didn't feel like a barrier anymore. It felt like permission, like the world washing itself clean while we started something new in the quiet aftermath. We didn't rush. We didn't need to. The couch creaked under our shifting weight as he wrapped an arm around me, and I rested my head against his shoulder. For the first time in a long time, I didn't feel like I had to hold anything back. And when he whispered, "Stay like this for a while," I just nodded, because there was nowhere else I'd rather be. The rain finally stopped sometime after midnight. I didn't notice at first. We were still curled up on the couch, legs tangled beneath the blanket, Ryan's arms slung comfortably around my shoulders. My cheek rested against his chest, rising and falling in time with his breathing, steady now, unguarded. It was the silence that caught my attention. No more steady drumbeat on the windows, just the hush of the world exhaling after a long, slow cry. I think the storm's over, I murmured, not moving. Ryan shifted slightly, just enough to press a soft kiss to my hair. Yeah, in more ways than one. I smiled against his chest. That was cheesy. He huffed a laugh. You like it? Unfortunately, I do. He leaned back a little to look at me, one hand still warm on my shoulder. So, what now? The question hung there, not heavy but cautious, like we were walking across something fragile and new. I let out a breath. Now we figure out what it means. Together. No pretending. No hiding behind tomato plants and porch beers. Ryan chuckled, eyes soft. Hey, those porch beers were deeply metaphorical. Sure, I said, nudging him with my foot. And the 5 times you accidentally locked yourself out? All just part of your grand emotional thesis? He smirked, then sobered a little. I was scared, Still kind of am. Me too. I let my fingers trail gently along his forearm. But I'm more scared of going back to how things were, seeing you every day and pretending it didn't mean something. He nodded slowly. I don't want that either. A quiet settled between us, the kind that didn't need filling. I shifted to sit up, still tucked close beside him, blanket pulled around our legs. Your marriage. I began, careful, not wanting to push too far too fast. It was done before she left, he said, gaze far away for a moment. We stopped being anything real years ago. I just didn't know what to do with that truth, until she finally said it out loud. And now, he said, turning to face me fully, I want to start telling myself new truths, like the fact that I haven't felt more like me than I have in your living room. That being next to you feels less like something I'm trying to figure out and more like something I finally understand. My throat tightened. I swallowed hard. Ryan, his hand found mine, fingers interlacing without hesitation this time. I'm not asking for everything, he said. Not all at once. I know there'll be stuff to work through, gossip, my own damn baggage, maybe even days where it all feels too big. But I asked, squeezing his hand gently. But I'm in this if you are. I nodded, words lodged somewhere behind a lump in my throat. I've been in this for a while, I think. He leaned in and kissed me again. Slower this time, less like a spark and more like a promise. I melted into it, into him, the warmth of his hand on my neck, grounding me in something that felt real and rooted. When we pulled back, he smirked. Also, if we're going to do this right, you should probably know I snore like a dying lawnmower. Oh, good, I grinned. Then we'll be perfect. I sleep like I'm fending off invisible attackers. He laughed, the sound low and unguarded, then pressed his forehead to mine. Do you think people will get it? He asked softly. Us. I don't care if they do, I said, as long as we do. We sat like that for a long time, bodies drawn close, hearts even closer. And when he eventually fell asleep with his head on my shoulder, soft breaths brushing my neck, I didn't move, because I knew this wasn't just a moment. It was the beginning of a life that, for the first time in a long time, felt like mine. Like ours. A week later, the sun came out again, not just in the sky, but in the small, quiet corners of my life. The world looked a little softer, like everything had been rinsed clean and hung out to dry. Ryan showed up at my front door, just after noon, holding 2 steaming takeout containers and wearing the kind of nervous smile that made something warm and stupid stir in my chest. You brought food? I said, stepping aside to let him in. I figured, he replied, lifting the bag slightly. If I'm going to keep showing up at your house, I should at least come bearing offerings. That's very medieval of you. He laughed, setting the containers down on the kitchen table. Well, I was hoping to win your favor. Maybe get invited to stay past dinner. I arched an eyebrow, folded my arms. Bold of you to assume I'm that easy. Hey, he said, reaching for my hand, eyes bright and fond. You let me sleep on your shoulder and drool on your hoodie? I think I've already won. I rolled my eyes, but I didn't let go of his hand. We ate on the porch, legs brushing beneath the table, the dog from 2 houses down barking faintly in the distance. Every now and then, Ryan would look over and just smile, like he was still getting used to this version of us, the one with no walls, no guessing games. After we finished, he leaned back in his chair, sipping his drink and watching the late afternoon sun filter through the leaves. I told my mom, he said after a minute. I turned toward him, surprised. Yeah. He nodded. She asked how things were with the house, and I didn't want to lie. I told her Claire left, and then I told her that I've been spending a lot of time with someone who makes me feel like I can breathe again. My heart thudded in my chest, and she didn't freak out. She said it made sense, he said, laughing softly. Apparently, she always wondered why I talked more about you than my own wife. I snorted. Well, I am great at parties. He reached across the table and took my hand again, rubbing his thumb gently along my knuckles. You don't have to say it back yet, or put a label on any of this. I want you to know I'm not going anywhere. I looked down at our hands. His touch was steady now, no longer hesitant, no longer testing the waters. He'd already waded in. So had I. I'm not either, I said. Whatever pace we take, I want to walk it with you. A breeze lifted through the porch screen, carrying the scent of cut grass and faint smoke from someone's backyard grill. It smelled like summer, like possibility. Ryan stood, pulling something from his pocket, a small round object, familiar. I frowned. Is that my lighter, he said, holding it out. The one I left on your porch that night. I laughed. I thought you forgot about that. I didn't. I left it on purpose, he said, placing it gently in my hand. Because I needed a reason to come back. I looked at it, weathered metal, worn smooth from use, and something caught in my throat. Keep it, I said quietly. He tilted his head. You sure? Yeah, I said, reaching out to gently tuck it back into his palm. Now you don't need excuses anymore. Ryan smiled, and for a second, it was like the world stilled around us. Then he took a step closer, leaned in, and kissed me, not like it was new, not like he was asking for permission, but like he already knew the answer. Like we'd both known it for a long time. We stood there in the golden light, arms around each other, the sky wide and endless above us. Not everything was figured out. Not yet. But for the first time, I wasn't afraid of what came next. Because the path forward was no longer something I had to walk alone. And that was more than enough.